They say experience is life's greatest teacher, but nothing prepared me for the sting of betrayal by someone I had once welcomed into my family with open arms. It started with a phone call. "Margaret." My daughter Sarah's voice cracked. On the other end, "I think David's cheating on me." My heart dropped. Not just because of the words, but because of what they meant. I had trusted David. I vouched for him. I defended him when my husband raised concerns during their engagement. And now, 6 years later, he had the nerve to disrespect my daughter and desecrate our trust. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. A week later, Sarah moved back into our guest room with our granddaughter, Lily, in tow. Her eyes were sunken, her hands shaking. I knew something deeper was unraveling. I gently urged her to talk, to release whatever was eating away at her. Eventually, she showed me the messages, dozens of them. A hidden phone filled with pictures, texts, and voice notes between David and some 20-something intern from his law firm. Disgusting. But even more gut-wrenching was what he'd said about Sarah. And me. "She's pathetic. Just like her. Mother. Always meddling. I'll get what I want out of them and then I'm done." Those words. I'll get what I want out of them. They looped in my mind for hours. What did he want? Sarah? The house? Our money? That's when it hit me. David had always taken an unusual interest in our family finances. I thought he was just being helpful. After all, he was a lawyer. Sharp, articulate, the kind of man who always had the right answer. I was relieved when Sarah married someone so polished. My husband had passed only a year before their wedding, and David had immediately tried to step into that void, not just as Sarah's husband, but as the self-proclaimed man of the house. I had been too grief-stricken to see the difference between comfort and control. And now, he had shown his cards. Or so I thought. Because as it turned out, David wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just cruel. He was calculating. 2 days after Sarah returned home, I got a call from our family accountant. "There have been some unusual changes to your joint investment portfolio," he said cautiously. "David added himself as a power of attorney last month. With your signature." My stomach turned cold. "Excuse me?" "Your signature was on the paperwork. I double-checked, Margaret." Only it wasn't. I had never signed anything. Not for David. The next week was a blur of sleepless nights and legal consultations. One forgery turned into multiple. Joint. Accounts, property holdings. He had filed paperwork, used old photocopies of my signature, even rerouted Sarah's personal savings into a trust he controlled. My daughter had no idea. None of us did. That's when it became clear. David hadn't. Just broken vows. He had orchestrated an entire web of deceit, one paper at a time, and he thought he could get away with it because he thought I was weak. Old, alone, distracted by grief and too blind to see the truth. He thought wrong. Because as much as this betrayal broke my heart, it lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. He underestimated me, and that was his biggest mistake. He may have thought he was playing a long game, that we were too soft, too trusting, too wounded to fight back. But I had one thing he didn't. I had nothing left to lose. And I was done playing nice. The more I dug, the deeper the rot went. David wasn't just manipulating the money. He was slowly positioning himself as the owner of everything my husband and I had built over a lifetime. The home we raised Sarah in, the retirement fund we'd grown through decades of disciplined saving, even the shares I inherited from my parents' estate. All of it. Being siphoned through clever legal loopholes and forged signatures, rewritten under the guise of family planning. And Sarah? She had no clue. She'd been blindsided by the affair, devastated by the betrayal. She couldn't even bring herself to say his name without trembling. So the last thing I wanted was to lay this financial mess at her feet too, but I couldn't protect her by staying silent. That's how David had gotten this far in the first place. I sat her down one night after Lily had gone to bed. Her eyes were puffy, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. "Sarah," I said gently, "there's something You need to see. I showed her everything: statements, account summaries, trust documents. Her jaw clenched tighter with every page. No, she said quietly. No, this can't be right. He told me he was fixing things, helping, that the accounts weren't secure under just my name. He was lying, sweetheart, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He's been lying for a long time. She broke down sobbing, and I let her cry in my arms. But inside, I wasn't crying anymore. I was boiling, furious. Because this wasn't just manipulation. This was predation. David had taken advantage of a grieving family and wrapped it in paperwork. He counted on Sarah's trust, on my grief, on our silence. But silence was over. The real kicker? He was trying to file for full custody of Lily, using Sarah's mental instability as his angle. He had already begun drafting paperwork with the help of one of his sleazy colleagues, all while keeping up the appearance of wanting to work things out with Sarah. He was playing both sides, waiting for the moment when he could claim our money and our child. I was done underestimating him. I hired a forensic accountant, someone I had worked with years ago during my own business days. I also brought in a private lawyer, one who wasn't afraid to take on someone like David. She reviewed the documents with a hardened expression and said, "He's good, but he's also greedy. That's his flaw." And she was right. Greed makes people sloppy. David had forged my name using an old copy of a signature from a birthday card I once wrote for Sarah. I recognized the curve of the M immediately. It was traced, carefully, but not perfectly. A handwriting analyst confirmed it. That alone gave us a foothold to start building a case. It would take time and precision, but I had both now. Meanwhile, David had no idea what was coming. He was still calling Sarah, texting her late at night with guilt-laced apologies and promises. "We can fix this," he'd say. "It's just a phase. We're a family, aren't we?" I watched her eyes flicker every time his name lit up on her phone, conflicted, hurt. But something in her had changed too. She was no longer waiting for his love. She was ready for justice. He thought he could play us against each other. That he could lie, cheat, and manipulate, and we'd fold under the pressure. That he could take everything from us without consequence. But he forgot one thing. I may be older. I may not know every digital trick in the book. But I raised a daughter, with a spine of steel, and I'm not the kind of woman you double-cross and walk away from. We were coming for him, and we were just getting started. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't just about money, or even betrayal. It was about legacy. David wasn't just trying to steal from Sarah. He was trying to erase everything my husband and I had worked our whole lives to leave behind. Every brick of our family home, every dollar we saved, every sacrifice we made. All of it was meant to give Sarah and Lily a secure future. And now it was all in jeopardy because of a man who saw our love as weakness. A man who smiled at our table while plotting to strip us clean. This was personal. David was playing a long game. Slowly, subtly, he'd worked his way into every crevice of our lives. After my husband died, he showed up constantly, fixing things around the house, driving Sarah to appointments, even managing paperwork I didn't have the energy to look at. I thought he was stepping up. I wanted to believe he was a good man. But in hindsight, every act of kindness had strings attached. The control started small. "Let me handle this investment for you, Margaret. I know how overwhelming it can be. Why don't you let me talk to the lawyer about your will? I can make sure it's all squared away." Looking back, I see now. I wasn't being cared for. I was being handled. By the time I caught on, he'd already put Sarah's name on a private account she'd never even heard of, an account he used to funnel money out of my trust. Then came the life insurance policy. I found out he'd listed himself as the executor of my estate in a draft will I'd never even seen. And that's when it hit me like ice water down my spine. This man didn't just want money. He wanted control over Sarah, over Lily, over me. If I died tomorrow, everything would go to him. I wasn't just a mark. I was a stepping stone. And Sarah? She was collateral damage. That realization flipped a switch in me. I was done feeling sorry. Done giving the benefit of the doubt. David had built his plan on the assumption that we would be too heartbroken, too confused, too slow to catch up. But he miscalculated one very important thing. I wasn't alone. I had allies, my lawyer, my accountant, and most importantly, Sarah. Once I told her everything, she was no longer afraid. She was furious. Not just for herself, but for her daughter. My daughter, she said one night, staring into the fireplace, will not grow up thinking this is love, or that men like him win. That's when I knew. This fight wasn't just about justice. It was about rewriting the story for the next generation. It was about teaching Lily, through our actions, that strength doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with strategy, with patience, with resolve. But still, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. David was smart. He had contacts. He worked in law. He knew how to hide things in plain sight, how to spin a narrative. If we slipped up, if we moved too soon, he'd find a way to bury everything before we could stop him. That's why we had to be careful. And that's why, when my lawyer said, "We need leverage," I knew exactly where to start. David had secrets, and he wasn't nearly as careful hiding them as he thought. While he was building his case against us, we were building one against him. Every forgery, every fake signature, every time-stamped message. The breadcrumbs were everywhere. He was just too arrogant to believe anyone would follow them. And soon, we'd have enough to confront him. Not with yelling, not with tears, with facts, with proof. With the one thing narcissists fear most: consequences. They say revenge is best served cold, but I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of pain. I wanted justice. I wanted truth. And I wanted protection for my daughter, my granddaughter, and the legacy my late husband and I had worked so hard to build. So we came up with a plan. Step 1. Secure everything we could before he realized. We were onto him. My lawyer filed a motion to freeze joint accounts and initiated an emergency injunction on the trust David had tried to claim. It wasn't permanent. Not yet. But it bought us time. Time to dig. Time to organize. Time to prepare. Step 2. Gather leverage. That meant collecting every piece of evidence: texts, emails, bank statements, legal forms with forged signatures. I compiled a digital folder with labeled timelines. Every step of David's scheme laid out in cold, hard detail. I also met with the notary whose seal appeared on the fake will and had them testify in writing that they had never signed off on it. David had forged that too. And then came the part that made my stomach turn. We needed to find out if he had done this before. My lawyer suggested a background sweep. At first, I thought it was a waste of time. David didn't have a criminal record. He was well-liked in his firm, charismatic, even charming. But charm, I've learned, is often a mask. What we found chilled me. 2 towns over, there was a sealed case involving a former client of his, an elderly widow who had accused David of manipulating her into signing over power of attorney. The case never went to trial. It was settled privately, buried under non-disclosure agreements. But it was a pattern, one that matched ours far too closely. David was a predator in a suit, and he thought the law would protect him because he was the law. But we were ready to flip that script. Step 3. Record everything, legally. Sarah began taking screenshots of every message. I had her wear a discreet voice recorder when she met David at a neutral location to talk about Lily. He showed up with his usual smug grin, his crocodile tears ready. He said all the right things. How much he regretted hurting her. How she was making things complicated by moving out. He suggested they rebuild trust by putting all financial accounts in his name so he could take care of everything. That recording was gold. Step 4. Protect Lily. We filed for a temporary custody order, citing emotional instability and financial manipulation on David's part. The judge wasn't quick to act, but once our lawyer presented a sample of the evidence, including the forged legal documents and the voice recording, he ordered supervised visitation only. That took the wind out of David's sails. He didn't see it coming. He tried to act calm. He tried to threaten us through veiled legal jargon. "This won't end well for you," he told Sarah in a text. "You're making things worse than they need to be." But David was slipping. His arrogance was becoming desperation. That's when we moved to step 5. Hit him where it hurt. His career. My lawyer helped me compile a formal ethics complaint to the State Bar Association. It included every fraudulent signature, every fake notarization, and the sealed case we had dug up. We didn't need to accuse him. We just showed them the truth. And we weren't done. I contacted a reporter I knew from years back, a local journalist who had a knack for investigative work and a strong sense of justice. I gave her a redacted version of our story, with documents to back it up. She was intrigued. She asked questions. She followed up. And when she realized how deep it went, how many people David had likely manipulated, she told me exactly what I hoped to hear. "I think people need to know who he really is." We were still quiet, still measured. But every step brought us closer to the final move. He thought he was playing chess, but I was playing poker. And I still had one card left. Every day, we edged closer to the moment he would fall, and every day, I made sure we were 10 steps ahead. David didn't know it, but we were dismantling his life from the inside out. While he went about his charade, posting smiling photos on social media, making passive-aggressive comments about Sarah's emotional instability to friends, still playing the victim, we were building an airtight case. Not just for court, but for the court of public opinion, too. One of the most important steps came when Sarah and I sat down with a financial crimes investigator, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Carla, who had worked on high-profile fraud cases. She examined David's paper trail like a bloodhound, and she didn't miss a thing. "He's been planning this for over a year," she said, highlighting transaction patterns. "Small withdrawals to foreign accounts, disguised as investment diversions. He didn't expect anyone to notice." Well, we noticed. We subpoenaed digital records, quietly. We collected signed affidavits from 2 of his previous clients who were willing to speak off the record. Both had stories that echoed Sarah's. One even said, "He convinced me it was all legal. I didn't realize I'd signed away my pension until it was too late." The State Bar's Ethics Committee had begun an inquiry. That alone put him on the defensive. He couldn't afford a suspension, not with his ego. He began firing off letters from his own lawyer, trying to bluff us into dropping the complaints. But we were immune to his games now. I made sure we never responded emotionally. Every move we made was backed by fact, legality, and evidence. When he sent a cease and desist letter after learning about the journalist's interest in his past, we didn't panic. We forwarded it to her legal team. That only made her more determined. The article dropped 3 days later. Trusted lawyer accused of pattern of exploiting widows and family estates. It didn't name Sarah or me, but the details were clear enough that anyone who knew us could read between the lines. The story was damning. It laid out the pattern of manipulation, the sealed settlement from years ago, the ethics complaint currently under investigation. The comments exploded. People began to talk. David tried to control the narrative, of course. He posted a long-winded message on his law firm's website, claiming he was being smeared by a disgruntled family member. But it was too late. His firm put him on immediate leave. Clients began canceling. His name was no longer on the door. But we still weren't done. Sarah's court case for full custody had been moved up, given the mounting evidence. Our lawyer submitted a binder 3 inches thick, filled with screenshots, documents, and recordings. The judge read through every page. And then came the forged will. That was the tipping point. The judge ordered a formal inquiry into David's handling of estate documents and referred the case for criminal review. Fraud, forgery, abuse of power. Suddenly it wasn't just us coming for David. It was the law. He called me that night. The first time he'd reached out directly in months. "You think you've won?" He hissed into the phone. "You have no idea what you've started." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. "You started this the moment you lied to my daughter. The moment you used my grief to steal from me," I said calmly. "You thought you were playing a game. But this was never a game to us." And then I hung up. That call was recorded too. Our lawyer smiled when she heard it. "It's not quite a confession," she said, "but it's certainly going to help." That week, Sarah was awarded sole custody of Lily. David was given supervised visitation pending the criminal investigation. His assets were frozen, his license suspended. The house he tried to steal from us? We filed a motion to reclaim full ownership. He was unraveling, and he knew it. The final move was coming, and I had saved the most satisfying moment for last. The day of the final hearing, the courtroom felt heavy with tension. David sat across from us in a pressed suit, but he looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Shoulders slouched, jaw tight, eyes darting toward every person who entered the room. He wasn't in control anymore, and that terrified him. Sarah sat beside me, steady and composed. Lily was with a sitter, blissfully unaware of the storm that had raged around her young life. We didn't come looking for revenge. We came for closure, for safety, for truth. And we had all three locked and loaded. The judge began by reviewing the full extent of our case: fraudulent signatures, illegal asset transfers, manipulation, and abuse of power. The ethics board's suspension of David's law license was now official. His criminal fraud investigation had opened just a day earlier. The court had also accepted our motion to fully revoke his rights to any portion of my estate, now and in the future. But the real reckoning came when we played the final recording. It was from a private conversation David had with a mutual acquaintance, a colleague from his firm, someone who, like many others, had begun to distance themselves once the article dropped. What David didn't know was that this colleague had come to us days before, angry and ashamed for ever trusting him. He said he was just biding his time until Margaret croaked, the man told us. That once she was gone, Sarah wouldn't know what to do with the estate, and he'd be the one holding the keys. That was all we needed. In the recording, David's voice was unmistakable. "She's old, she's clueless," he said. "Once she's out of the picture, I'll have everything. Sarah'll cave once she sees the legal side of it. She's too emotional to handle anything long-term. And the kid, well, she won't even remember any of this." The courtroom went silent. I watched as David's face turned the color of ash. He opened his mouth to object, but the judge held up a hand. No one wanted to hear him anymore. The truth was out, laid bare, ugly and undeniable. The judge's voice was firm and final. "Mr. Donnelly, you have abused your professional position, manipulated grieving family members, and attempted to fraudulently gain control over a family estate and minor child's future. This court finds your actions not only unethical, but morally reprehensible." With that, the judge signed the order. David was stripped of all legal rights to Sarah's finances, to Lily's custody, and to any part of my estate. A restraining order was granted. A criminal fraud case was pending. He stood up to protest. Security stepped forward. And for the first time since this all began, I smiled. Not a smile of cruelty, not of gloating. A smile of relief. A smile of peace, because it was over. He thought he could outsmart us, thought he could wear his mask forever, hiding behind legal jargon and empty charm. But he forgot one thing. When you underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose, you lose everything. Outside the courthouse, Sarah hugged me tighter than she ever had. "You saved us, Mom," she whispered. I looked at her, at the fire, in her eyes that had replaced the fear, and I shook my head. "No," I said. "We saved each other." In the months that followed, life began to settle. David moved out of state. He had no choice. His reputation was gone. His license, his career, his control, gone. Sarah focused on her own career, and Lily started at a new preschool, laughing and carefree. The house he tried to steal from us? It's in Lily's name now, a future safe from men like him. I still walk the garden my husband and I planted decades ago. I talk to him sometimes, whispering the updates, telling him we're okay. Because we are. I may be older, I may be slower, but I am not weak. David thought he could outsmart me. But in the end, I played my final card. And it was checkmate.